And welcome to Ask the Experts on 570 News Radio. My name's Mark Payne, sitting in for Brock Greenhalgh. What a pleasure today to have a well-respected gentleman that is known in the real estate world, Faisal Susiwala, and his network, Remax Network, has been ranked as the #1 individual Remax agent worldwide. That's saying something. He's achieved significant lifetime sales. He's involved in the community, and at the same time, he's the author of a book, The Real Deal, billion-dollar real estate broker, with an interesting story about a teenager that decided to start his career in real estate. Is that where this all came from?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
Well, you've got an interesting story to tell, but we've got a lot of meat to get to today. So let's jump right in. In this world of ours, there's so much information from coming from different people, influencers, but you really think it's important to be careful of who you're taking influence and opinions from, yes?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise on social media, and influencers will say things to increase their following, increase their subscriptions. And sometimes, you hear things like, so Grant Cardone, who's a well-known US real estate influencer, recently told people to stop saving money, stop buying homes, and stop
What?
saving for retirement. Yes, it's mind-boggling, right? So claiming that these are middle-class traps. But for Canadians, this advice isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. Saving money still matters in Canada and probably anywhere else in the world. But while inflation and low interest rates on saving accounts can make saving feel pointless right now, Canadians still need accessible cash. So we have programs in Canada that perhaps our neighbors to the south don't have. We have appreciation options tax-free in your home that the Americans may not have. So when, mainstream media and social media is in our ears and in our faces all day long, telling us don't do this, don't, especially to young people today. They seem to follow blindly what influencers are suggesting. And, I call it the insta life. So what you see on social media is often not a true portrayal of what real life is all about. And that's one of the challenges, and we can talk forever about how it's impacting our young people today into, imposter syndrome and this whole feeling of not having what others have. But what they're not possibly realizing is that it's not real. It's a photo opportunity. They're standing in front of a nice car or eating a nice meal or in a high-end hotel, and that's just one clip of their life. But it's not what reality is. And again, when we are being told that, investing in these formats, and it's not just, I don't want to just pick on Mr. Cardone, but there are many influencers that have written books and are on TV shows and are selling coaching programs that are saying, well, don't do this, but invest with us because we have, a larger scale opportunity for you. That's where it's very, very dangerous to follow. So always do your own homework. Speak to people in real life who you look up to, who can mentor you, who can give you proper advice and navigate you through, these especially these times. Bankers, lawyers, parents, people. I always have had a rule in my life where I always like to take advice from people who have done it already and who have succeeded at doing it. Not only because I want to learn how they got there, but what failures and what struggles they faced. And when you learn from other people's experiences, you're able to, learn from that and not make those mistakes. And someone is willing to teach you these things, take their advice.
I wonder if some of these influencers are just after shock value, right? They just want to get press, right? It's not even that what they're saying runs all that deep. Now let's talk because Canada, as much as we have a connection to that country to the south, is a different bird. You alluded to that. And it's always been one of these bastions, not only your RSP, tax-free savings account, but also home ownership is the wealth anchor, right? It has been always thought of
It
as the anchor.
It is the home. Your home is your foundation, especially in Canada, where the appreciation that you have on your primary residence is not taxable. There's no capital gains tax on the gains that you make, so it allows us to use this more or less as an investment vehicle, as a retirement vehicle, as an equity vehicle, something that you can extract funds from to put your kids through school, give them a higher education. You can really build on an entire life and create significant wealth if the one asset that you have is your home, and if you have been able to consistently work at paying it off, then you can leverage some of that. And I don't often, it's a sort of dangerous territory saying leverage your paid off home, but there are ways in which it gives you access to more credit because you have this asset as part of your portfolio.
And I think it's safe to say there are people in different life situations, or there may be, and we're hearing more and more about maybe parents that are helping the youth get their first home or credit for that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And this is where we have to be very mindful again of, what, and I've talked about it often about even parents. Are we giving away our inheritance too early? And are we in a position to be able to live through our golden years and still be able to have accommodation, food, have somewhat of a comfortable life in your retirement? And we're seeing, a lot of seniors are now gifting their kids the funds that they need to. I believe there's always a need to help younger people get into their first home. But if you're gifting your kids to make, investments, you may want to be careful because sometimes these investments can be very risky. And of course, we have to be very mindful of, speaking of social media and whatnot, the scams that are out there and things that look like, wow, this is a great deal. If it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is.
Well, I think that's good advice, sage advice to always, and I mean, it applies to all levels of life, but be aware of the source of the opinion you're getting and don't necessarily rest your laurels on one opinion. Is that right?
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Okay. Faisal, let's move on to talk about something that the city of Brampton just did that is kind of raising eyebrows. You're best to explain it rather than I. They've increased the minor variance application fee. Could you explain?
Yeah, so in any city, if you are doing something that is not part of the bylaws, that's not part of the zoning bylaw, that's not part of the zoning in general of your neighborhood, and for example, if the zoning allows you to have a 20 by 20 garage and nothing larger than that, and you want to do a 25 by 25, you may have to go for a minor variance. And every municipality has a fee. In some cities, it's $400. In some cities it's $1,000. In some cities it's maybe $1,500. So Brampton, the fee for a minor variance was $720. It is now $12,000. That's a
Wow.
1,600% jump. And why? The big question, why would they do that?
Yeah, what's the impetus? Yes.
It is, absolutely. The city says it's to crack down on illegal rental units and unpermitted construction. So officials are arguing that the high fee will discourage people from bypassing zoning laws and building without approval. So if I got to make an application fee that may not get approved, the thought's going to run through my head. Well, instead of me going and getting the proper channels and permits, which would have been $720, now it's $12,000, and I could still get turned down for this thing. So I'm not even going to ask for permission. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And
Right.
I don't know what the fines will be, but the tendency has always been it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So I think that's going to happen even more so. So residents are not happy. Homeowners who want to make small changes to their properties, like adding a second unit, adjusting a setback. This fee now will have a serious financial burden. So if you're adding a second unit and you need to make a little bit of a setback change on your rear yard as to how close you could be to the fence and whatnot, it's got $12,000 fee to get that permission, whereas it used to be $720.
Well,
Just
one has to wonder if losses outweigh, will this affect people's, pricing them out? of
Oh,
home ownership.
it will. Well, two things will happen. One, you're going to see a lot of illegal construction and probably unsafe construction happening without permits. And two, it's just going to exactly that. Just price them right out of doing it, and they'll say, "Well, forget it. We're not going to even." So if they were going to move mom and dad into a secondary unit, but all of this red tape, which the government professes to say we're trying to get through this bureaucratic crap and make things a little bit more streamlined, make it easier for the consumers. Well, I don't know how a 1600% jump is going to make things easier for anyone, and it's just more of a burden. But the city council in Brampton says that it'll cover a $4 million shortfall in the planning department and will help manage Brampton's rapid growth. Well, so maybe we got to look at managing the rapid growth
Right.
and not
Yeah.
so much and covering their shortfalls in other ways than to tax those who are homeowners that are trying to create affordable housing maybe for their families, or just create not even affordable housing, because no, we're going to get into affordable housing in a bit, but just to create an option for their adult son or daughter to live with them and have some independence without having to go out and rent an apartment for themselves.
You're listening to Ask the Experts on 570 News Radio with real estate expert answering a lot of information today. And we've got more for you. Faisal Susiwala, available at homeshack.com. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Ask the Experts on 570 News Radio. It's Mark Payne in for Brock Greenhalgh today with our guest, Faisal Susiwala, well-known real estate agent in the RE/MAX network. He is, I went to your website. I saw the multiple awards you've won. You know what you're doing. I love the fact also that you believe in reaching beyond the catch basin of Waterloo region to the edges of Toronto. I mean, you really look for potential buyers everywhere. You're a wealth of knowledge. With that in mind, I want to tap into that knowledge. Let's get into the topic of first-time home buyers and a change that was made by the feds at the end of May.
Yeah, this is big news because May 27th, the federal government started offering a new GST rebate that could save any first-time home buyer up to $50,000 when buying a newly built home. So that's huge. So, for example, Mark, if you and I go into a new home site, and let's say we're homeowners currently, and we want to buy a home, and the builder is offering that home for $1 million on the market, you and I will pay $1 million if we want to buy that home. But that first time home buyer, up to $1 million, will get that 5% GST rebate. So they will actually pay $950 for the same.
That's
So
significant.
significant savings. So that, it will certainly open up options for first time home buyers. It'll encourage builders to continue buildings because now there will be this whole pool of buyers that possibly wasn't there before because it was cost per. And again, if they're buying up to $700,000, that rebate would be $35,000 based on the 5% GST rebate. So there's still a significant savings for that first-time home buyer buying brand new. So there's some criteria. You must be a first-time home buyer, at least 18 years of age, a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. You cannot have owned a home in the past 4 years. So that's very interesting. So it's not as much as it is for a first-time home buyer. If you hadn't owned a home in the last 4 years, let's say you went through some financial situation, whatnot, or you left the country for 4 years, now you've come back and you're shocked at how expensive things are. Well, you're considered a first-time home buyer and you can get that $50,000, up to $50,000 rebate on that as well. So it's pretty welcome news. And it applies to new home builders, homes you build yourself. So if you buy a piece of land and you want to build, you can claim back the GST portion, co-op housing as well, as long as you're living there as your primary residence. So
Ah,
that's
okay.
okay. So this is not an investment tool, or all the investors say, "Oh, woohoo, let's just go out there and buy a bunch of properties because
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it is. It's really meant to get people into home ownership. So, I applaud the government on having this initiative. I think this is great. It's going to encourage more buyers into the market. It's going to encourage more building, more jobs, everything. Home building industry creates so much peripheral value, and it's important that the government is supporting these builders as well. And this will actually deliver $3.9 billion in tax savings over 5 years. So that's a massive savings to home buyers. $3.9 billion. So if you're buying, pre-construction might be a good option right now. And the other value you have in that is that you could buy now, it doesn't close for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or even a year. So you've got some runway to save up, some money. But again, first step in every situation is get to the bank, talk to a professional, get qualified. Don't make offers unless you know that you're in a position to buy, and get firm mortgage approval. So that means that if you go to the bank, they have said, yes, Mark, you are qualified. And between now and 6 months, if your closing is happening in 6 months, regardless of what happens in your life, we will give you your mortgage. So if you get laid off, you lose your job, that's what's called a firm approval. So if you're having a long closing date, you don't want to have that with the uncertainty. So make sure your bank gives you a firm approval for your mortgage.
So that's interesting. You say 6 months. Is that sort of the standard window? Because my thought goes to if it's a new build, what if that ownership, the takeover, the closing is delayed? Does that affect things?
Yeah, in some instances, and depending on which bank you're dealing with, they'll give up to a year on that as well. So I think it's just every bank has their own criteria. So it's just important to kind of go in eyes wide open, know what you're getting signing up for, make sure you're in a position to follow through on what you're signing up for, because you're putting down a substantial amount of money as a deposit, and you don't want to go through the process of the what ifs.
We're talking to Faisal Susiwala here on Ask the Experts, real estate agent with all the answers, or at least a lot of the answers. Can I anecdotally, do you have a sense of first-time home buyers, how many actually look to new builds versus existing homes? Do we have stats? Does it vary geographically or?
It does vary geographically, right on. Because so in Toronto, you'll find that first-time home buyers will typically go to pre-construction, new home builds, mostly condo market, right? We were seeing a lot of that in the KW area, but I found that that was drawing more of a investor clientele as opposed to a first-time home buyer, because we are in a region where 500,000 ish can still get you your first starter home. It may not be your dream home, but it'll get you in the door. It'll get you a small story and a half wartime home. It might get you a little fixer upper if you're handy. It could get you into various townhome condos throughout the region. So that $500,000 mark, whereas if you go to Milton, Mississauga, Brampton, Oakville, Burlington, those areas don't really have anything in resale that is, that 450 to 550 range. So pre-construction new builds are their only options.
Okay, now I know during the pandemic we heard and know of a lot of people that had the option to work totally remotely, which certainly increased people reaching out a little further. Now that we're seeing a lot of companies say, no, we want you in X number of days a week, we still are in that commute area, are we not, for the GTA?
Yeah, great question. Because so it's one is work. So we find that many people will come to these communities because it's affordable, they can work from home, they're still relatively close to the highway, especially if you're in Cambridge or in Kitchener, Dune area. Waterloo's a little bit further out, but depending on where they're commuting to or how many days they're required, they need to be close to the highway. So that, but secondly, that many of us are forgetting is that age group. So let's not talk first-time homebuyers, just general homeowners
Okay.
are saying, okay, my kids are now going to go to university. Where are they going to go? There's a good chance that they will go to Guelph, Waterloo, Laurier, McMaster, Conestoga College, Mohawk College. So many of the universities that are in and around our region. And if mom and dad can work from home, they now don't have they would, so they're physically moving their primary residence to Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, or Guelph, so that they can work from anywhere, but their kids can live at home, and now they don't have to pay for apartments. I've got two kids at Western, so I know how expensive it can be to pay for their rent and whatnot. So if you can avoid having to take on that additional burden of rental accommodation for your kids, it's easier if you could have that luxury of working from home. Then that's what's bringing a lot of people into our area as well.
I'm imagining the expression on your kids' faces when you say, well, instead of you going away to school, we're going to move the whole family close to you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it would really affect their party lifestyle.
Listen, practicality wins out when they realize. And as you said, that's an option that maybe a lot of people may not even consider, which is why it's so worthwhile to reach out to a real estate agent like yourself. Everybody has a unique situation, and there's not a one size fits all. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, you're dead on that. Yes.
All right. We're talking to Faisal Susiwala, well known real estate agent, award winning agent who believes in community. He also believes on getting you what you deserve for your house. Over asking would be a beautiful thing. And he has the tools and ability to do that. He's also the author of The Real Deal $1 Billion Real Estate Broker. You can find out more and get in touch through homeshack.com or by phone 519-624-5555. We'll be back with more of Faisal in just a moment on Ask the Experts, 570 News Radio. Welcome back to Ask the Experts here on 570 News Radio. Appreciate you listening today. Maybe you're in a position where you're considering moving. Maybe you have children looking at first-time home ownership. The gentleman that has a lot of the answers for you is Faisal Susiwala, an award-winning real estate agent, ranked #1 REMAX individual agent worldwide. He's achieved some lifetime sales that would embarrass me. Well, they do. Congratulations to your success. Also, the author of The Real Deal $1 Billion Real Estate Broker, available to be contacted, homeshack.com. Let's get back into it, and let's talk about the cost of a home in Waterloo region. I'm one of these people that reads different newsletters the end of every month that show the fluctuations. What can you tell us about what's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm often asked, hey, I'm going to buy a parcel of land and I'd like to build a home on there. What's the cost per square foot? It's a valid question because you're trying to determine, am I better to buy a resale home? Am I better to buy a parcel of land and build on it? If I'm buying through a builder, am I paying a massive premium based on the cost per square foot? And so it's interesting. The average cost to build a house in Ontario ranges between $155 to $285. So, I mean, it could be double depending on where you are. With higher costs like in Ottawa and Toronto, so urban areas are way more expensive. It reaches between $400 to $500 per square foot. So, basic math, 2,000 square foot home, just the construction cost without the land, without the permit, without the soft costs would be 2,000 square foot at $500 a square foot. Construction would be about $1 million there. Now,
Wow.
it could be closer to $600,000 for a similar home in Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, minus the land value. So there's different formulas in how you come up with land value. So you could take a 40-foot lot, 40 by 100-foot lot, and say, I want to build a 2,000 square foot home. The builder has probably paid somewhere between $9,000 to $12,000 per linear foot. So let's take an average of $10,000 a foot. 40-foot lot, linear foot, 40 feet times 10,000, $400,000 for the land. Now you want to build a home that is 2,000 square feet on that. It will cost you $600,000 for the material costs, etc., to build that, plus soft costs. So if you're paying around 1.1 for a brand new home on a 40-foot lot, that's a reasonable price. Again, depending on the upgrades and the features and whatnot you put in, that could go up another, $100,000.
Why vary greatly depending on where in the region? I mean, we're talking about quite a large area, or is that pretty consistent
So
when you
it's
get to the
what happens is, so the land value will vary. So that's the only unknown factor, is what is the land that I'm building on worth? The a 2x4 in Cambridge sells for the same price as a 2x4 in Mississauga.
Right.
So the construction material is not going to change. Now, there may be some fluctuations in trades, labor, et cetera. So, and that's where cost goes up if you're building right downtown Toronto. Your cost is going to go up, travel time, all that. It's all accounted for.
Right. Right.
But linear foot, yes, like, you could pay 30,000 a linear foot in Toronto, whereas you're paying one third of that. That's where the cost really, and I'm overly simplifying it, but that's sort of the idea behind it, is what was my land value on which I'm building. And that's where your cost is related to. But in addition to that, you get into a lot of these soft costs, which are over and above your land and your building. And that would be architectural drawings, permits, legal fees, engineering fees, typically ranging, and I just average it out to around $35 per square foot. Okay, so you have to now add that to your cost. The City of Kitchener development charges for a single detached dwelling are approximately $30,000 per unit. So one house, just the fee, the development charge is 30,000 on
Wow.
top of the other soft costs. So this is where a lot of those additional costs, you could add very comfortably 10% to your overall build when you take into account all these various fees and costs related to building that home. But there's still great value in our region. And I think that we have to realize that beyond the cost of building, the affordability, it's also quality of life. If we think that our region is getting crowded and there's, traffic problems and whatnot, you don't have to go too far east to see what a mess it is out there. So I think we're truly blessed to be in this region and be able to enjoy the amenities of this region, as much as we all complain about traffic, an hour ago or whatnot, but it is still a very, very safe and sound and comfortable and beautiful region to live in and build in and grow your family in.
A proud member of our community. That you are, sir. I believe that. Faisal Susiwala, real estate expert, joins us here on Ask the Experts. Maybe second only to tariff, sorry, is housing crisis that we hear so much about. Dig into that a little bit. What does that mean for us?
So my opinion is not going to be very popular. I will argue there is no housing crisis. The housing crisis, in my opinion, is fabricated by the government to make roll out programs, get votes. We're going to do this. We're going to build 1 million more homes. I cannot imagine 1 million more homes being dumped into our inventory pool right now. We can't sell the amount of inventory that we have, which is getting to be at an all-time high as it is. Rents have actually come down. So if we're in a crisis, if we have an inventory issue where we need more, wouldn't we expect prices to continue rising and going nuts? What happened in our market is COVID drove this demand to come into the market in a short period of time. So if we were thinking that, in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to buy a house, and all of a sudden you see prices going up 3%, 4% per month, not per year, per month. You're saying, oh boy, I don't think I should wait 3 or 4 years because I'll be priced out of the market by then. So what do? You jump in now, you get into a bidding war. I was getting 20, 25 offers per listing for a solid year on every listing I had. Why? Because all of those folks who would have spaced out their entry into the real estate market now followed the herd, started buying and gobbling up all the inventory, which now gives the government the bright idea that, oh my goodness, we're in a housing crisis. We need more homes for all these people. But what happened after COVID? What happened after March, April of 2022? Things started slowing down. Interest rates started going up. Inflation became a problem. There is no housing crisis. It's an affordability crisis, but there's no housing crisis. We don't need more homes. I don't understand why this narrative is out there. It used to be 1 million, then it was 3 million, 3.5 million homes needed. This is just wind being thrown at us by politicians to get votes to say, we're going to create more affordable housing. We're going to, streamline the processes to get things through the system so we can build more homes. We're going to let you build a house in your backyard. Why? There's lots of inventory out there. Pick it up. There's tons, and you can get a good deal right now.
Is part of it that the legislation was sort of born out of the bubble in the beginning of 2022 where the prices were that high, and it just took a little too long to enact to the point where, as you suggest now, the prices have come down?
Exactly what you just said. We have a reactive government. They don't look far enough to see, okay, is there going to be enough absorption of this stuff that we're spewing out? And are we going to be able to roll it out in a timely manner, like you just said, to make this stuff all happen? And the answer is a solid no. There was no way. The infrastructure wasn't there. The support wasn't there. The bureaucracy was too difficult to get through. And no one was on the same page. This is why, the province had to step in and say, okay, we're going to take the powers away from the municipalities, and we're just going to say, let's do this. There's a lot of conflict that's happening. It's not practical, and we're seeing it from the trenches, as opposed to someone sitting at Parliament Hill thinking, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Well, it's not. It's a really, really bad idea. And the whole idea and the narrative that we're in a housing crisis is just crap. It's not real. There is no housing crisis.
Is there anyone politically listening to what you just said? In other words, that we're going to potentially end up with a situation that is just going to flood the market with even more homes and affect pricing?
I'm starting to hear opinions change or soften, and fewer people are defending that narrative that there's a housing crisis. Fewer politicians are. They're not going to publicly come out and say it because their votes were dependent on it. And to change, I mean, politicians do that, but to change, a few months later, that might not look so good on them.
And maybe they're just mashing affordable housing in with the term housing crisis. Maybe there's more than one issue at play. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Exactly. And again, as I said right at the beginning, there's an affordability crisis. There's not a housing crisis. And right now, this is not a time to panic. This is a time to plan. So these are times, and if pausing right now is the right thing to do, then that's the right thing to do for you. I've been advising a lot of people that are sort of in panic mode. Oh, tariffs, and we're going to be out of jobs, and this country is going downhill, and we're not even going to have a country soon enough. Like, okay, just relax. There's not, things are not end. The world is not ending. Everything will be okay. I am also telling people who are panicking to say, well, I better, especially I have been doing this for 38 years. I have clients who are at that age, in their 70s, they're saying, well, we got to sell right now because everything's going to go bad. And if I don't sell now, it's going to be a lot worse next year. I can confidently say, and not as a realtor who's trying to get a listing from somebody, that whether you sell right now or you kick the can down the road for another year, it's going to be pretty much flat. So don't make this decision that, oh, if I don't sell today, in a month's time or 2 months' time, I'm going to be, because the narrative, again, maybe it's salesmanship that if you don't do it right now, I'm not sure I can get to the same amount of money I could right now. So you better do it right now. There's going to be peaks and valleys in every year. Even in a booming market, we see a 2 to 3% fluctuation, but you time it. You sell in the spring, you sell in the summer months, you take a break in the fall unless you've got something happening in the region like job relocations, major
Yeah,
employment
something in
coming in.
particular. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you just pause and you have a thoughtful process in making that decision. Do I need to sell? Especially if it's your last home and you're depending on that to carry you through your retirement days.
I like that. Plan, don't panic. Good advice. Speaking of pausing, let's do that right now, but we'll be back. Faisal Susiwala, more of his knowledge in the world of real estate here on Ask the Experts. Back in a moment. And welcome back to 570 News Radio. This is Ask the Experts. My name's Mark Payne and for Brock Greenhalgh today. A pleasure to have Faisal Susiwala, a well-known real estate agent. I almost want to say celebrity here locally for those that know you, who does a lot of good for people that are either looking for their first home or have used your services for many times because you've had a lot of expertise for a lot of years. He can be reached at homeshack.com, 519-624-5555. Let's get into a scenario. And again, so many different people have different things going on as far as home ownership. What about selling less than a year after you buy a home?
This is an important consideration when you're selling your home. So if you live in your home less than 1 year, it could be deemed that this was an investment property and you could be taxed capital gains tax, or worse yet, you could be taxed based on your income on that. So it's very important that you understand that living in your home a minimum of 1 year will get you over that timeline in the eyes of the CRA. You also don't want to come across as a flipper of homes, that someone just lives in a home, moves, lives in a home, moves, just to make that basically churning and whatnot. So in the US, it's very different, but in Canada, you have to be very mindful of that. And you have to be able to claim through the CRA the principal residence exemption to avoid paying the tax. Now, if something drastic happened in your life where, matrimonial issue and you were going through a divorce and you had to split, as long as you can justify a job relocation, for example, you can justify that. If you're just doing this as a business, or you think, oh, I'm up $100,000 this in the first 9 months that I bought this house, I'm going to take that and go buy another house. You better have a pretty good story as to why you did not live there beyond the 1 year, not just because I had an opportunity to make some big money. Because if you had the opportunity to make some big money here, the government wants their pound of flesh from you.
So what you're suggesting is the CRA has that 1 year rule, but there are always exceptions and you could argue your case and find an exemption?
Exactly. And lawyers will tell you, I believe it was about 7 years ago that the CRA required lawyers to report every transaction, sales transaction, even if it was your primary residence. So now there's a record that you have had a disposition of real estate property, even if it was your own home. In the past, it was only payable on, investment properties and whatnot. But now there's another layer of reporting. And I believe that was initiated because there was so much wealth built on principal residence. And if you remember, there was a time where the government wanted to possibly look at taxing your primary residence with capital gains. And I think that's where the research had started. Again, might be a conspiracy theory, but my understanding is, well, why would they want to know, when you bought, what you sold for? Why are we reporting this information to the CRA? And I believe that was one of the reasons.
Yeah, I recall seeing that 1 year question a couple of times when I did my taxes this year. And thankfully, that's not my intention. I've been there more than a couple of years. Let's move on to something else that may be something you didn't consider. Talk to the fact that looking at life insurance when you get your mortgage, I didn't necessarily tie the two together.
So it's always sort of slipped in when you're doing your application for your mortgage and you get approved. You get this nice big thick package to sign, and while you're signing away, the banker will say, "Oh, by the way, you're taking a $500,000 mortgage for $39 a month. We can insure your mortgage in case something happens to you. Your mortgage will be paid off, and your family won't be burdened with that." So many people say, "Oh, woohoo, this is great." So you're paying based on your initial $500,000 that you borrowed. And let's say you're paying this $39 a month for the next 15 years while you have this mortgage and you're paying it down. But now the mortgage is down to $200,000 or $150,000 in 15 years. You've still been paying the premium on the higher amount that you took
Oh,
up, right? And again, God forbid something happens to you, the payout is not going to be 500,000. The payout is going to be 150,000 because you've covered and insured the mortgage loan, not you. Whereas if you go independent and same day you got your home mortgage, same day you bought your first house, you closed on it, and you call your insurance agent and say, Wayne, I'd like a $500,000 policy. Should anything happen to me, I would like it paid out to my family. Now, regardless of what your mortgage amount is or when one passes away, the full amount of $500,000 will be paid out to them. And the estate or the beneficiary has autonomy over where that money is paid to. They may say, look, I've got a great job. I can continue paying this mortgage. I don't need my mortgage paid off, but I need the cottage paid off, or I need to pay off some other debt, or I need to help my kids buy their first home. That, mom or dad, whoever passed away, would have wanted as part of their wish. So you lose control. So essentially, you're insuring the bank. You're not insuring your family against any losses. So that's something to keep in mind when you blindly sign away. And look, I get it. Bankers have a job to do. Mortgage people have a job to do. They get paid on selling these policies. They get bonused on selling these policies. And I'm nothing against them for trying, but just get a second opinion on whether or not that's the right option for you or not.
That's really interesting that you explain. And we're not just talking about a first-time homeowner, right?
Anybody.
But I think I don't want to say pressure, but there's this feeling that as these fees and options are thrown at you, assumption is, and I'm a very trusting person, that they're doing it in my best interest. And forgetting the fact, no, they're selling. I mean, they are selling. They got to make a living, right?
It's a checkbox, right? It's like when you go on Expedia or you go on booking a flight or a hotel, it's for an extra $14 a day, you can get flight cancellation, and it says, no, I do not want to protect my trip against this $1,800 potential loss. So you're like, yes, I do. I want to protect myself against this $1,800. So it's how do I get a yes out of you? It's not telling you that this may be not, and you may already have that coverage on your credit card. I'm not talking about Expedia or whatever. You may already have cancellation on there or protection on there, but it's just that fear of, if I don't do it now, and they sell you on the idea that no medical, you don't have to worry if you have any health issues. Well, that's all okay until something happens, and then they go on Instagram and find you sitting there smoking 3 packs an hour of cigarettes and say, oh, hang on, you didn't really disclose this. And we found, so the insurance company's job is to try to avoid paying out if they can. And they're going to dig into, did you fail to disclose something that maybe you should have? Although they don't have a medical requirement, you still have a requirement to say, well, yeah, I do smoke a pack of cigarettes a day or whatever it is that I do every day.
Yeah, this is good. You're answering a lot of good things that people can get those answers to your unique situation by contacting Faisal, the team, homeshack.com, 519-624-5555. I mentioned that you yourself are an author, but I'm intrigued, and I read about your story in your late teens, getting into the world of real estate. Who the influences on you, the literary influences or the resources that you reached out to?
There's been many inspiration, a lot of inspiration in my life, a lot of people that I've looked up to. But some of the books very, very early on, and David Chilton is a local author, The
Absolutely.
Wealthy Barber. His book is great. Like it just teaches you how to stay on track, stay on budget, invest wisely. Just doing all the right things to have a very strong foundation. And right from at the age of 19, I use that sort of as my guide. The second book that I really love is The Millionaire Teacher by Andrew Holland. And again, just there's no fluff. It's just about how to build wealth on an average income. Just what are the right things to do, and how do you chip away, and how do you build wealth? Just doing the little things that you should do each day. Very similar to David's story, right? The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Again, a great, and these are all Canadian authors. Proud Canadian. I want to make sure we support our Canadian authors. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Again, a great book about daily habits, just daily habits that lead to extraordinary results. And it's not just about wealth and real estate and investment. It's about life, just general life stuff, right? Which we all sometimes need a reminder of. Wealthing Like Rabbits by Robert R. Brown, another great book. It's fun, it's relatable, personal finance for young Canadians. And, youth literacy, financial literacy is so important to me, teaching my kids and teaching other kids. So those are some of the books that I've enjoyed and I've followed for many, many years.
And I'm glad you mentioned Canadian because there are times I've picked up a book and thought, oh, this is really worthwhile, only to realize it's really centric around an American market or other markets. So that's good. There's one other that you may have left out. That's The Real Deal, Billion-Dollar Real Estate Broker, the book that you yourself wrote. And it sounds like, based on what you've read in your life, you took a very basic but solid approach and methodology. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It's so, a little bit of it is a biography. A lot of it is just what I've done in my life to create some wealth and what rules I followed on investing. And lastly, it's for my colleagues on what systems do I implement in my real estate business. And I for lack of a better term, it's an open book into my life and what I've done throughout my life and what my journey has looked like, what my failures have looked like, and what my struggles were to help me get to a point. And I'm not done yet, but still working at it.
A life to be proud of. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Faisal Susiwala today, and you've had a chance to hear him. You've got questions. Reach out. You're going to have a friendly voice at the other end. Homeshack.com. Call 519-624-5555. And again, you'll find out more about the book, The Real Deal, at homeshack.com. I thank you for your time today, Faisal.
Thank you for having me on, Mark. Appreciate it.
This has been Ask the Experts on 570 News Radio. Mark in for Brock today. Our thanks to our technical producer, Devin Robertson. Back again next Saturday. Have a great day.